Astros, a focus on H-Town hardball.
So we are very excited about this edition of Go Astros. We are visited by Mike Acosta, Astros historian. We had originally recorded this for our National Hat Day episode, which is why you'll hear that referenced, but we decided in the edit to hold it off till now so we can present it in its entirety. Even if you're not an Astros fan, it's a great insight to a history of a ball club and what goes into tracking that history. We all know that baseball is all about its future, but it's also about its past. And I love this conversation so much that I hope you enjoy it. And again, thanks, Mike, for coming on. So we're excited to welcome to Let's Get to Mr. Mike Acosta. He is the historian for the Houston Astros. And Mike, first of all, I've got a great office, but you have got a great office. That's sweet back there.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I got some, I've been collecting for a long time. So I got a lot of my prime Astrodome related items in my home office here.
It's funny. I was thinking about the dome the other day because I can remember as a kid, I pretty much grew up there, just how big it got in the horizon when you got close and you knew you were getting close to the dome. It was such a special place for me. And I know that you were working on a dome paper model. Is that correct? How was that all going?
Well, I serve on the board of directors for the Astrodome Conservancy. And so that organization is charged with coming up with a plan for redeveloping the Astrodome. And that's something that I've been doing for a number of years just on my own and kind of going through and seeing what actually works, what is the best use for the building and how we can re-energize it and really open it up to a whole new class of Houstonians, who have either moved here or were born, before or after, the dome stopped, was not being used for baseball or football or rodeo anymore. So it's a wonderful building, and we've done a lot of projects with it. I'm still working on a lot of projects, and just trying to move forward with it.
Again, so much. I would probably do anything to see one more baseball game there, just to soak it all in, because I've watched so many old videos because I got old. One of the things that's interesting, and this is an anecdote that you won't care about, but I'll tell for the audience. I was deployed to Bosnia during the height of the Killer Bees era. And during that deployment, won an Army Commendation Medal. And my sergeant major's pinning the medal on me. And rather than give me these words of encouragement that a senior NCO gives to a young private, was telling me that the Astros were nothing and would never win anything in my lifetime. What is it like? I mean, as you've sort of gotten involved and have worked through all this Astros history for as long as you've done it, there really is a lot of history to this team and a lot of great moments in baseball that happened with the Astros.
There is, when I would say, the Astros were an expansion team. The 60s produced, 4 expansion teams, with actually more than that. But, it was during a time period where, we took a back seat to a lot of the other cities, even New York with the Mets. They took a little bit more prominence. They had Casey Stengel, associated with the team in the early days, and the Astros were a very youthful team, but something that an organization that was based on the future and innovation and just a different type of mindset of doing things different and trying to set a path that really had never been done before. And that was the mindset of the Astros, and that's why they were called the Astros and why the Astrodome was developed the way it was and the way it played out. The Astro name is short for astronauts, but it's the spirit and the meaning behind all that. And so, we've gone through several decades now where you would say, well, what's an Astro? And you say, well, it's short for astronauts. Well, you think of a Houston Astro now, and you're thinking of Jeff Bagwell, you're thinking of Craig Biggio, Nolan Ryan, Jose Cruz, Jose Altuve, in the way that you would think of what's a New York Yankee. That's Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle. We have several decades, under our belt now where we do have a significant history. And even before, say the 1990s, you get to a team that's, close to 30 years old, 20, 20 some odd years in the 80s, there were so many interesting stories that went along with the Houston Astros. And it's really this way in a lot of respects. It's this way with many other teams too. If you look at Montreal, if it's San Diego, Anaheim, a lot of these, Milwaukee, just these other teams that maybe you kind of consider don't get the same respect as some of the other clubs because of the history behind the teams. There's always an interesting story, but Houston is very unique. And it's mainly because we built the Astrodome. It's mainly because we had AstroTurf. We did everything indoors. We did something that had never been done before. We had the rainbow uniforms come about in the 70s, and just a really, really against the grain type of franchise. And not that there's anything wrong with that. There was a lot of great players and fun players that came along, and a young franchise that was finding its way and kind of navigating through some ownership issues and then some financial issues in the 70s. And then, some commitment and some stability in the 80s with John McMullen. But, and then of course with Drake McClain and Jim Crane later on. But, the Astros always had, in my mind, as a kid growing up in Houston, I was always very curious. I would hear these little, first of all, I was always hearing about Wrigley Field, Yankee Stadium, great cathedrals of baseball. And I would see the games on TV. You would see the Yankees on TV, or you would see the Cubs on WGN and even the Atlanta Braves on TBS. And my day during the summertime would be filled a combination of going outside and playing and then coming back in and seeing some baseball. And it always looked different. It was a different experience because these guys were playing out there in the sunshine. Yeah. And then the Astros would come on at 7 o'clock or 7:30 and we're inside the Astrodome. Or I was going to the game that night and we're in the Astrodome. And it's totally different. But I had a lot of curiosity about that. Why were we different? Why, what prompted Houston? What was so special in Houston? Why did we have all that? Why was it so different? Why was the experience and the storyline different? And so there were a lot of fascinating personalities involved with the development of the team. A lot of great stories, a lot of great, big wins for the city of Houston and the surrounding areas in Harris County and the counties around and the rest of the state, actually, in Louisiana, Arkansas, all the surrounding areas for a very long time. But I was just very curious. And so as a kid, I wanted to know. It's very easy. I can go look up in the newspaper. I could find a media guide and look up how many home runs, Jimmy Wynn. Jimmy Wynn was before my time. I was more in the era of Jose Cruz, Nolan Ryan, Joe Niekro, Billy Doran, in the late 70s and into the 80s. But when you want to look at the history of a team, you can always go, and now it's so easy, with all the websites and all the Twitters and everything else. But back then there was no source to go to except the library. And so I was very curious. Okay, I can see how many home runs, and I can read about Jimmy Wynn, and I can see what he did on the field and how many games the Astros won in a certain year, or what kind of difficulties they had as the Colt 45s. But I really wanted to know, why were we called the Astros? Why did we have the Astrodome? Why did we have AstroTurf? What all of this, the big encompassing story was fascinating to me. And so I did a lot of research. My mom would take me to the library. She worked downtown. And we would go to the library, especially during the summertime. Yeah. And spend some time there. And I would look at the microfilm and the photographs and some of the books, that were. I remember the day that I found that there was a biography on Judge Roy Hoffines. And
Yeah.
As a little kid, I did who this guy was. But when I opened up that book and started reading and started looking, and like I said, I'm a kid. I was.
I'm trying to think. You like 7, 8 years old?
Maybe in fourth grade.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I was maybe like in fourth or fifth grade when I started doing this, and I started reading about these different personalities, Ari Bob Smith and Craig Cullinan and George Kirksey, and find out who these guys were that were basically unheard of at the time, unless you really knew your history. And so those guys became heroes to me, just like the ball players on the field, because if it hadn't been for them, we would not have any Houston Astros, and we never would have had the Colt 45s. And then all these wonderful players that have come through town would never have had an opportunity to entertain the fans and play and accomplish some great things. So I always thought that the Astros had a very fascinating story, just because of the unique quality of how they came about. So anybody who came and said, the Astros didn't have any history, well, maybe they're just basing that on just pure win percentages, and the Astros had not been in the World Series and had come close, and this and that. But I think when you look at a public trust like a sports franchise, you look at pride, we cheer for the guys who wear the right color clothing, so to speak, that represents us and as a community. And it's a good spirit, and so I think that, to detract, for someone to detract from a franchise, simply because they haven't won a World Series at the time, or, maybe they're only 2 decades old, that's whatever.
It's funny because it's our National Hat Day special, and I'm a graduate of the University of Texas. And so I believe that the Longhorns wear burnt orange at home and white on the road, and they don't wear anything else. Conversely, the Astros, part of their tradition is really being on the cutting edge of uniform look. How important was that early on for the team? The shooting star jerseys, for example, the rainbow up here, then the blue and the gold. How important was that to the team to always kind of be looking forward as far as their look on the field?
Well, with the Colt 45 insignia that they had, the gun that won the West and would win the National League was the slogan by Bill Nieder, who was the insurance salesman in Houston who won the naming contest. And the colors that were associated, the navy and orange. First off, there's been a lot of talk as to where that navy and orange came from. The orange was a favorite color of Roy Hoffein's, but it was also a dominant color of where Paul Richards came from with the Baltimore Orioles before coming to Houston. And then the blue color that was mixed in there was meant to look like a Texas sunset or a Texas sunrise, is what was relayed to me. And so they wanted something that would go with the Western type theme. And so you think of the old West movies, and you have the broad wide angle shots with the sky and everything, and the cowboys on the range, and so to speak. So that's kind of where that came from. But it also matched extremely well when they went with the astronaut in space theme when they changed the name. It was always very important with the ownership, especially with Roy Hoffein's and the look and the appearance and how it was going to, I think the shooting star had movement to it. We saw the open star in the late 90s with the gold star, kind of an open end star. Mm-hmm. They wanted that movement in the original shooting star as well. And that was something that was a signature. And Alan Shepard, the astronaut, was one of the deciding factors in renaming the team from the Colt 45s to the Astros. And it came down to the stars and the Astros. And, with Astros being short for astronauts, and the space program taking off, he really liked that. He told Roy Hoffein's that would be his choice. And so that's what they went with. But, you have to also understand with uniforms and appearances and where baseball was in general by the early 70s. Roy Hoffein's had a stroke in 1970. He was incapacitated for a while. They appointed some other people to kind of, he was still there. He was still very alert, but he no longer was involved as much as he was. This is a guy who the Astrodome was his palace. And so he was involved in everything. Now, he let the baseball people run the team. I talked to some of the former players before, and I used to ask them, how was he visible in the clubhouse? And he wasn't. He was more concerned with the operation of the Astrodome, and then what became the Astro Domain when they built Astro Hall and Astro World and the Astro World hotels, and creating a destination place for people to come to that area. But when he had his stroke, it also was the beginning of some financial difficulties for the Astros in the early 70s. And by the time they got to the mid 70s, the creditors had kind of taken over and controlled the team. So, you had Ford Motor Credit, Mattel that was involved in there. And so they were kind of running the team. So when you get into the 70s, you also see the advent of, or the larger emergence of color television. And so not only in Houston did we see the rainbow uniforms, but you saw, green and gold uniforms in Oakland. And you eventually saw those gold uniforms in Pittsburgh, and Baltimore had some orange uniforms as well, but those were solid uniforms, one kind of a monotone uniform where they primarily had one color. And what the Astros did, leading into 1975, was completely different, because you had shades of, 2 shades of orange, you had yellow and red, and you still had the navy in there, but it was a different look of what was supposed to be a shooting star going across the lower torso, and then the Astro name on top.
Right.
So it was something that was bold. It was something that they wanted, where no matter if you were watching, because if you're still watching the game on black and white television, there was going to be no doubt that you were watching the Houston Astros, which, instead of shades of orange and red and yellow, you were going to be seeing a grayscale shade and right. These different colors of gray across these stripes. And then the dark star that was on the uniform. So it was something that I think was born out of trying to do something different, because the team was not doing that well financially.
Right.
The Astrodome actually needed a lot of attention at that time. It became, the rainbow uniform just became something, what I call the DNA of the franchise. From that point, I think that as much as I really, really love the shooting star, and I think it's a very good logo, and it was very good looking uniform, and I love it. The current uniforms that the Astros wear now, it was sort of born out of that original uniform,
right?
With the orange, and blue, and the way it's trimmed out a little bit. It's scaled back a lot more simpler than the shooting star uniform, but with that rainbow uniform, that distinctly became Houston, just like the pinstripes became for the Yankees in New York. So it was something that really made it so when you thought of Astros, you thought of orange hats and rainbow uniforms. And that's right about the time where I started going to games in the late 70s as a toddler, and then I walk in there and I see, this bright AstroTurf field and lights on the scoreboard across the outfield and the different color seats. And then the guys on the field are wearing these uniforms and these hats. And it was just a cool atmosphere going in there. And then of course you had the variations, and the variations of the rainbow uniform over the years was based on the ownership. And that's usually where the uniform changes are really born from, is from ownership changes. And when John McMullen took over in 1979, and then his first full season was in 1980, first off, he wanted to introduce a different version of the rainbow uniform, which was what became the Sunday. And actually they started wearing a variation of this on the road, and it was more of a gray scale, kind of an off-white jersey that had the Astros on the front. They were wearing this uniform actually on October 6th of 1980, which was the day that they clinched their first ever division title. And they won the NL West against the Dodgers in game 163, because they had to have a 1-game playoff. They were a little too confident going into LA with a 3-game lead. They wound up losing 3 games in a row. So they were tied. And so they had a 1-game playoff, game 163 on October 6th of 80. And this was the uniform that they were wearing. And this was the first alternate version of the rainbow uniform, and it had the rainbow stripes on the sleeves, which were a little bit different than the full body rainbow. It was you had navy, and then red, and then orange, yellow in the middle, and then on the other side, orange, red, and navy again. So you had two stripes of those colors, except for the yellow down the middle. And then that became the pattern that extended. I mean, that became so identifiable.
Yeah.
That look with the rainbow uniforms, whether it was on the shoulders or if it was across the front, it became so identifiable that when they did a renovation to the Astrodome in the 1980s were basically the decade of upgrades for the Astrodome. Lots of different renovations that went on to bring it up to modern standards at that time. And part of that was the seating color changes. And the upper deck, which had for years been known as the gold level, it was a gold and bronze combination. Became the rainbow level, and that's where the rainbow level was born. After the rainbow uniforms had been around for a little bit, and then the shoulder rainbow was there in the early '80s. By the time they got to 1984, which is when they began overhauling and reupholstering the seats using the same chair, the same seat pans from 1965, but they just reupholstered them like 3,000 at a time. It took several months to do it. And so the dome actually took the look of what the team was wearing on the field because of that. And so that just kind of stayed there. And of course, that look, with the H and the star on the hat, the orange star, and then of course, the variation with the navy star on an orange hat, with the white H on it, that remained there for many, many years. And it wasn't until Drayden McLane bought the team. And again, we have another example of with an ownership change, the owner wants to do something different. And originally the designs for what were going to be the new uniforms of the Astros involved orange and navy, and they were different takes of how you could use orange and navy, or it was clear that they were going to go away from the rainbow because that was kind of a different era. And Drayden McLane felt that this was a new beginning for the team. And so things would be familiar, but it wouldn't necessarily just continue on the look that they had for many years. And so they went to the gold and midnight blue. But originally they were actually looking at that same font with that shooting star. They were looking at that in like a metallic, almost like a bronze or an orange. They were looking to see how well that would adapt into just using a new font. But they decided to go ahead and go against what would be, when you look up at the sky at night, you don't see a navy colored sky. You see almost like a midnight blue. And so that's what they were looking for, was the color of a night sky, and then having the shooting star against that.
Yeah.
And then of course, that turned out to be a relatively short-lived uniform, because the team started building Minute Maid Park in the late 90s, and in 1997 they broke ground on the new ballpark downtown, and then 98 and 99 it was under construction, and so it was they didn't want to carry that look. The gold and the midnight blue actually turned out to be what I thought was a pretty good look for the time.
I loved it. Yeah,
in the 90s.
I was into it. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was really sharp. I remember when the uniforms came out, I kind of wished it had the orange in it, or had a trim of it at least, or something that kind of looked like it was linked to the years before. But I thought it was really sharp. But they didn't want to carry that over to the new ballpark. And by 1999, I was working for the team at that time, and I remember hearing some of the rumors early on as to what the uniforms were going to look like, and some of us internally were talking about some of the things that we had kind of heard about, and then I got to see a swatch, kind of a style guide of what the uniforms were going to look like, and indeed they were going to be pinstripe, and we were going to have red, and like a brick red, and black was going to be part of that. And then the star was going to be a modified version of what we saw with the gold star, with the open end. It just wasn't going to have as long of a tail on it. So, excuse me. And then, of course, that stayed along for a long time. The pinstripe in that era actually was around about as long, or just as long, as the rainbow uniform.
That's
and
yeah.
That kind of that's kind of shocking to people sometimes, because they think of the rainbow uniform as being the uniform of the Astros, or
Right.
kind of the heyday of the Astros. But in essence, from 2000 to 2012, there was a pinstripe uniform there. And it became the first uniform to be worn in a World Series by the Astros as well. So it had some history. It was kind of an odd time. I remember when we moved to Minute Maid Park and showing up at the new park, and the actual move it took place about 10 days before the first exhibition game.
Wow.
And so it was. They were still trying to finish the park. They had a lot of finishing work. The punch list was rather long, and they were trying to get a lot of things done. I remember walking into Union Station, and you could smell the fresh paint. The furniture, the office furniture, had plastic covers. We pulled the covers off. We were the first people to sit in those chairs, and computers were brought in, and the offices were set, and this and that. So it was kind of a unique time, because it felt, in a way, like we had moved from a decent neighborhood to like River Oaks. Now
Right.
we were in a whole different neighborhood, but it kind of felt like we had kind of pushed aside some of the looks of the past, because you didn't see the rainbow stuff anymore. And even when you walked inside, what was in Enron Field in the first couple of years there, you also didn't really see any sign of who played there. Like, you didn't. There was a logo. There was a big sign above the original video board in center field, but it was pretty high up, and it didn't show up on TV a lot. But there were no real Astro logos throughout Enron Field when you first got there. It was just the colors. The colors of the ballpark were more prevalent. What they call river water sea green or something like that. It's kind of a light green, kind of a cool light green, which is the color of the steel. And then the brickwork, you saw a lot of tans and browns and kind of brick reds. They were kind of the colors of the franchise came from the appearance of Union Station. And so, the limestone, the black came from the smoke of the old trains that used to come through there, or so they said. I always thought that a steam train had kind of a white steam, but I'm guessing the coal trains, had black smoke. But anyway, the colors went away from the idea of what the Astros were. In my mind for a while, but they, after a few years, and you get to the World Series, and then people start seeing that as an identity, and then you get a new group of people who actually grow up with that look.
Yeah.
But then in 2013, when Jim Crane buys the team, and again, another example of with a new owner of the team. He's a Houstonian, and the group that owns the Astros are, almost all of them are from Houston. And so they understand and grew up with the Astros, and they wanted something that they really wanted to take it internally and see something that was redeveloped that really meant Houston Astros. And so that's it was very clear and simple when we had a process internally and start to begin to look at old uniforms and what might work, and kind of take a survey internally what we thought we might want to see. It was very quick, where people were saying we wanted a star on the hat where the H was on top of it once again, and we wanted to try to go back to orange and navy. And what came out, the study that was done with Major League Baseball, first off, one of the finalists was kind of a recoloring of the script logo of the brick red and pinstripe era.
Sure. Yeah.
Where we wouldn't necessarily have the pinstripes, but you would still have the same font, the same type of star, and we would just use white, navy, and orange. Again, see how that worked. Kind of like they did in the 90s before the Gold Star stuff. And then there was another one where it was very, very futuristic. And the only memory that I have of it was it had a lot of sharp angles on it. It had what kind of looked like it was really, really different. And that's kind of what you want to do during a process like this, where you want to see the different extremes. You want to see, not just middle of the road stuff, but you want to see the extremes so you can really compare and really narrow down what you like. And the other option is what you see today, what the Astros wear today. And that's what we wound up going with. Something that was traditional, something that was based in team history and kind of what I was talking about in the groups that I was involved in, the DNA of the Houston Astros.
I will tell you, I'm a filmmaker by profession. And so the red and black look almost look generic. Like when you're watching a sitcom and they're drinking beer, but they're not drinking Budweiser. It was like looking at baseball teams, not the Astros. But there was a part of me that just when I saw that rainbow come back in the H star and all of that, just felt like home again. So, I mean, I guess we'll put you on the spot then as we wrap up. What is your favorite all-time Astros uniform look?
My all-time favorite is actually the shooting star. I love the look of it, and I get very technical in the construction of how the uniforms, how a logo translates to construction of a uniform. And what I mean by that is the original shooting star uniform had what's called chain stitching. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's like a loop chain. It's a very, very nice, elaborate embroidery. So it's not like looking at a hat, like if you look at your hat and you see the threads and how they're embroidered on your hat. It's a lot. If you go on Google and look up chain stitching, you'll see that it's a very, very nice embroidery. It's a very elegant looking type of thing. I think maybe the Cardinals still use it. At the time that we went to the pinstripes in 2000, in 2002, we went to chain stitching. And we were one of the very few teams, one of like maybe 4 teams that was using it at the time. And we actually briefly considered it for the current uniforms, but felt that it was just going to add too much weight to the front of the uniform, because it's a lot of thread and it sometimes adds a little bit more weight. But if you've ever seen those old varsity type of jackets, where the patch is on the back or the patch on the sleeves, the kids wear, something kind of like that, but not as thick. It's a very, very cool look. I really love the way. I actually own a couple of those uniforms, original uniforms from the 60s in a private collection, and I just love the way it looks. That said, I really love the rainbow uniforms too, just because that's what I grew up with. But as a favorite, it has to be the shooting star.
If I could have my way, I would have Jim Crane just basically 5 days. We rotate every 5 days. Rainbows, blue and gold, shooting star, and then the orange.
Yeah, and that's been talked about. It's kind of like you've seen some other teams go to what has been a retro uniform, and they kind of make it part of their style guide, and they're wearing it on, say, Fridays or Saturdays. But it's also, if you do that, then it kind of loses the mystique a little bit. It kind of like, okay, well, it becomes every day, and then what's going to happen? Are people going to become tired of it again? Is ownership going to be, and it's going to disappear? Or some. I mean, it's been a proven revenue generator. The rainbow uniform was like the most popular retro jersey that was being produced for many, many years. I'm not sure if it still is, but it's always been very popular. So, if you want to keep some sort of value on it. So you do want to have those days. And we actually last year, with the weird season that we had, we had like 5 or 6 dates where we were going to have some very, very unique throwback games, and I was part of that selection in which uniforms we should use, and I was pushing for some things that we had never really worn before on the field since the days of those uniforms. And so I was looking at wearing the black alternate from the 2000s and the zipper front shooting star jersey from the early 70s, right before. So things like that, and some new things to bring. The alternate midnight blue Sunday uniform from the last years in the Astrodome. And that was part of that too. But anyway, it just didn't happen, and we'll see if that happens in the future again. But that was the one thing about the 2020 season that I was pretty disappointed in, because we weren't going to have anybody there to really see them, and so
I had
it wouldn't have been the same activity.
I had tickets for all the jersey giveaways from that season. Like I had already had them.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I was ready. Before we let you go, do you think we'll see a refresh anytime soon of the? I know that Nike just took over, and some teams have been kind of gotten a little bit different look. Anything that you know of, or
I mean, I think we're always looking. The Astros are always looking to keep things fresh, but I think that there's a good amount of feeling to keep things consistent. And I think that with last year's uniform in 2020 was pretty much the same uniform that we had seen before with Majestic, except it had the Nike logo on it. It was same basic construction, but I think Nike is going to look at a different type of construction of uniform in the coming years. And so we might see some modifications, kind of like we did with introducing the new Sunday with the rainbow panels on the side. That was a project that I worked really close on to bring to the field. You might see some small things. I don't know. You never can tell. But now I would probably say no. There's not anything really drastic right now. But I think that there's some fun stuff that will be in addition to the normal uniforms. I think that won't go away. In fact, I think that'll just I mean, I can't say too much, but I think that there's some things down the line that hopefully the fans will really enjoy, because I think it would be cool.
Well, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for being on Let's Get To. I hope everybody follows you, because you're one of my favorite Twitter follows. Have a great New Year, and we can't wait to get everybody back to the ballpark.
Yeah, hopefully we can see people this year at the ballpark, and I appreciate you having me on, and thank you for your service, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.